Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. This is Take It to the Hizzy Fantasy Football TITTH number 22. Today we're coming to you with our Week 11 must starts. Looks like a pretty solid card this week. There's like 5 or 6 games I'm kind of having a tough time with. Certainly looking forward to this Sunday after a pretty boring Thursday night game, or at least boring until it wasn't boring, right? The football product that we saw was pretty meh, but the WWE product that we saw was, aces. Let's go, okay? As far as a entertainment value, that whole Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph situation was pretty entertaining until it wasn't, I guess. Seeing the scuffle and then seeing dude with the coming down with the helmet, like, okay, that's happening. Dude took dude's helmet and tried to kill him with it. That's awesome. It's kind of overshadowing everything right now as far as like NFL news goes. Myles Garrett's out for the year, so as he rightly deserves. I mean, my goodness, that was crazy. But let's just kind of jump right into it here. This week, starting off with the quarterbacks, I'm looking at Kyle Allen hosting Atlanta. Atlanta is still allowing the 12th most passing yards allowed, 5th most passing touchdowns allowed, 112 QBR rating on average allowed. They can't sack the quarterback. They're tied for like the second fewest in the league. Should give Allen plenty of time, to pick up or cut up the secondary. Allen, coming off a pretty good performance, had 307 passing yards. Touchdown and an interception, but I like his value this week with Atlanta coming to town. He does still get to play at home. Falcons secondary hasn't been very good. They have been a little bit better up against the run, so I think that provides some upside for Allen, getting the ball to CMC, and then CMC, really increasing Allen's value this week. So I think it's a pretty good spot to throw him in there. I think Atlanta's allowing, the 3rd most fantasy points to the quarterback position, so a lot of value here streaming quarterbacks up against Atlanta still. I know last week they had a pretty decent performance up against Drew Brees. He didn't throw a touchdown or an interception, but he still had over 300 passing yards, and Mike Thomas still had himself a day. So I like Kyle Allen this week. I think he can throw multiple touchdowns, 2 to 3 total touchdowns, and over 300 passing yards. So I think he's in a good spot this week. I think you can feel comfortable starting him for sure. Next up, his twin brother, Josh Allen. Allen and Allen, right? They're playing Miami, and Miami stinks. They're terrible. Last time Josh Allen played Miami, he had over 20 points in fantasy. He's easily going to get 2 touchdowns in this game. Could add another one on the ground. He has 3 rushing touchdowns in his last 2 games, 2 and 1. So the Dolphins are allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the quarterback position, and they still allow a decent amount of run on the ground. There's 103 average QBR rating allowed by them. So I like Allen to easily get here, like I said, 2 to 3 touchdowns total, whether he's doing it with his legs, throwing the ball, whatever, and over 270 all-purpose yards, adds 30 to 40 yards on the ground. They don't really seem to make it a priority to have him take off or a ton of run design plays. So I like him to still grab like 30 to 40 rushing yards. I don't know if we're getting a big rushing game this year. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case with the way that they have their offensive scheme set up. So I like him to find the end zone 2 to 3 times this week, like I said, and over 270 all-purpose yards passing and rushing. Fire him up there, no concerns. Miami stinks. They're terrible. Next up, Dak Prescott traveling to Detroit. I'm hoping that Matt Stafford plays in this game. I'll have an update tomorrow on that. If Stafford's playing, then there's going to be a positive game flow for both sides. Jeff Driscoll came in last week. I wasn't on him, didn't want any part of him. Threw a touchdown, threw an interception, but was pretty meh. I think he'll have a harder time this week up against the Dallas secondary. Despite playing at home, if he is in the game. But I'm hoping Stafford gets in here so that we can have some positive game flow on both sides. There's a little bit more passing action on both sides, and the defenses aren't staying, on the sidelines. It's a quick possession game, hopefully. With Stafford in the lineup, not so much with him out. Detroit allowing the 98 QBR rating on average, 15 passing touchdowns allowed since their bye, and they only allow 4 touchdowns in the air before their bye. So they've been crumbling in the air and in the secondary as of late, like their last 5 or 6 games. So you want to keep rolling quarterbacks out against these guys. Playing on the road is a downside for Dak, but Dak has been hot. He's got 6 passing touchdowns his past 2 games, over 650 passing yards in his past 2 games. All of his starters are healthy. Cooper is off the injury report despite being an early week add. So I easily see like 3 passing touchdowns in this game for Dak. Hopefully Stafford is in and he's pushing the tempo of the game, and both of these guys are producing positive game flow for all their weapons here. So I like Dak a lot this week, despite him playing on the road. He's just hot right now. Keep rolling him out. Next up, I have Derek Carr with Cincinnati. Cincinnati allowing the 13th most passing yards allowed in the air, 5th most fantasy points allowed to quarterback position. Lamar Jackson and Jared Goff tore them up in the past 2 weeks. Oakland is coming off of more rest, so they have more prep time and they're playing at home. So I like Carr to throw 2 to 3 touchdowns and over 300 yards in this game. Cincinnati, just another team that stinks, been really bad, not very good. I like the Raiders to take this one outright for sure, and we're going to see a ton of Josh Jacobs, but that's going to keep Derek Carr in the offense rolling. I don't think Jacobs is going to overly dominate the game, but he is on this list. He's going to be a must start for sure. The matchup against Cincinnati is just right for quarterbacks and running backs right now. So feel really comfortable throwing Carr out there. I'll get to Jacobs here in a bit. But yeah, Cincinnati secondary just been really bad, especially in recent weeks. Like I mentioned, like Lamar Jackson, Goff tore them up for a bunch of yards and fantasy points. So I think Derek Carr is in another good spot this week. Like I said, coming off a rest week. They played on Thursday night the week before, playing at home. A lot of upside here up against the Cincinnati defense. Fire up Derek Carr, no concern. Next up and final quarterback is Jimmy Garoppolo hosting Arizona. Last time he played Arizona, they were in Arizona, and Jimmy threw for 4 touchdowns. So there's some recency bias here. It's only like a couple of weeks ago. But Arizona, they're allowing the most passing touchdowns. They're allowing a QBR rating of 111. They only have 4 interceptions on the year. The only downside here is that the weapons are down for Jimmy, right? You have Sanders that's banged up. He's talking about playing. He's saying that he's going to play. I'm not confident that I want to put him in my lineup this week. He hasn't practiced all week as far as I'm concerned. Kittle, he looks doubtful. Breida, he looks doubtful. Mostert's banged up. So the weapons aren't there for him. But I still like with him to flirt with 2 to 3 passing touchdowns and over 300 yards. That's just how bad and how much lack of confidence, I should say, I have in the Arizona defense. They've just been one of the worst on the year. So I'm going to keep throwing out quarterbacks up against Arizona for sure. And it's awesome because Kyler Murray on the other side in that offense, they keep the tempo going. They produce positive game flow for both sides with their scheme. The defenses aren't staying on the field or on the sidelines for too long. So I like the upside for both of those guys, Murray and Garoppolo this week. Obviously, Murray going up against one of the best defenses in the league, up against the San Francisco defense. So that's why he's not on this list. I don't feel as confident, of course, but I think that their scheme, always keeps Murray's game flow positive and makes him active and live for every week to go off for points. Being that, this week there's a little bit of a drawback, obviously, but that's why I have Garoppolo on the list and not Murray. So that was Garoppolo, Derek Carr, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, and Kyle Allen. Allen, Carr, Prescott, and Garoppolo. Get him in there. Should be solid to go this week. Next up, we have the running backs. First up, Josh Jacobs with Cincinnati. Bengals are allowing the most rushing yards on the year, second most rushing touchdowns allowed. It's like a 4-way tie for 12 touchdowns allowed on the ground. 5.2 yards per carry. He's just been solid overall. He's been banged up and been playing hurt. He's healthy, this week. Nothing on the injury report. So I think Jacobs will get plenty of action. I only like him to score about like 1 touchdown this week. I think that they're gonna spread it out. The Raiders could see some Darren Waller, some Tyrell Williams, maybe even one of the backup guys get a touchdown. Between the backups, I like Washington to get a rushing touchdown over Rashard, and that's just because of red zone usage. I don't think that they'll do or need to pass the ball a ton in the red zone. I think that they'll, based off of the upside of their rushing attack and the downside of the Cincinnati rushing defense, there could be an opportunity for Washington to stuff one home on a goal line or 7 to 10 yard carry or something like that. So I like Josh Jacobs the most. I like him to get over 20 touches, at least 1 touchdown. Definitely going to be flirting with 100 all-purpose yards for sure, one way or the other. So yeah, fire up Josh Jacobs, no concern. Damon Williams with the Chargers. Finally, I can put him on this list. He has some reliable usage in recent weeks. He's recorded 100 all-purpose yards in his last 2 games. He has 4 red zone rushes in the past 2 weeks. Chargers are allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the running back position, 11 most rushing yards allowed, and 4.2 yards allowed per carry. That's a little bit lower, so I do expect Dame to get a couple of catches this week, 4 to 5 catches, something like that. With Mahomes back, it just pushes everyone's value back up, and it couldn't come at a better time for Damon Williams for Mahomes to come back, because McCoy has just kind of been slipping down the depth chart in recent weeks. They have him listed right now behind Darrell Williams, which is pretty interesting. I know they benched him, or he was a healthy cut last week, but I figured, he'd get a shot to at least move back up the depth chart, but they haven't done so just yet. So I'm going to keep rolling Damon Williams out until they give me a reason otherwise. Like I said, recency bias is all over him. Past 2 weeks, over 100 all-purpose yards. I think he finds the end zone this week. Maybe he doesn't put up big gaudy numbers, but I like him to be at least 80 all-purpose yards and a touchdown this week. Mix in some catches, mix in some running. I think there's plenty of upside this week up against the Chargers' poor rushing defense. Also in this game, I like Austin Eckler. Gordon, of course, is going to eat. I think we've established that he is back to the Melvin Gordon of yesterday or yesteryear, where the volume is there. They're rolling him out, and he's producing, right? And the spot is really good for Gordon this week, but I like Eckler because of just the game flow in this matchup. I think that the Chargers are going to be chasing points. Even if they are up, I think they are going to be passing a lot, especially the running back position up against the Chiefs, who can rush the quarterback. They can bring pressure, and Rivers is very well known for just slipping it out, just getting out there at the last second. So I like Eckler this week. I like him to get maybe even 6 or 7 catches, 80 all-purpose yards. Excuse me. Eckler has at least 80 total yards or a touchdown in 9 out of 10 games this season. And Gordon has been back for 4 or 5 weeks now, so his value is still there. Keep rolling him out until they just completely fade him. Kansas City's allowing the 2nd most rushing yards allowed, 12 rushing touchdowns allowed. Again, that's tied 2nd for the most in the league. There's a 4-way tie there. Gordon will have a good game, I believe, but also will Eckler. I think there's going to be solid usage for both of these guys. So yeah, Gordon in the easy must start. I think you're just looking at the numbers, looking at last week production or recent week production for Gordon. You're absolutely getting him in there, right? Don't forget about Eckler. Keep him in your lineups. He's going to get it done this week. He's going to find the end zone, I believe, this week for sure. Next up, I have Joe Mixon at Oakland. Raiders are allowing the 10th most fantasy points to the running back position, Don't allow a ton of yards, but have allowed 11 total touchdowns to running backs, 6 rushing and 5 receiving. So there is some value for Mixon to find the end zone this week. Don't just be looking at those rushing defensive numbers on Oakland, and you're like, man, they've only allowed 6 rushing touchdowns. That's pretty good. They're allowing receiving touchdowns to running backs as well. So keep that in mind. I do like Mixon to catch a ball in the red zone and take one home to the promised land. So like his odds to find the end zone. He's put together a couple of really good games here, at least a touchdown or 100 yards in the past 3 games, and he's got 10 red zone rushes in the past 2 weeks. So I like his usage. Should be fairly used quite a bit in Oakland. I do think that they're chasing points early on, and I think he's going to get used and leaned on with Finley in the lineup now. He does need a safety blanket of some sort, and I think that Mixon is going to continue to benefit from him being in the lineup. Finley can get the ball out a lot quicker than Andy Dalton, so I like the upside that he actually brings to the weapons more than Andy Dalton. Sorry, Andy. Next up, I have Brian Hill traveling to Carolina. Running backs up against Carolina, just been a really good play in recent weeks, last 5 or 6 weeks. Brian Hill, did plenty of damage last week with Freeman out. Freeman's doubtful or going to be out this week. Panthers are allowing the 7th most rushing yards allowed on the ground, 5.2 yards per carry. They've just been really bad, in recent weeks, like I mentioned. So you got to keep strolling the running backs up against the Panthers. Not a big, sexy name out there, but definitely was, on the waiver wire this week. People were probably all over him if they didn't get him for free the week before. So yeah, definitely fire him up. I'm not sure about the Freeman injury. I'm not sure how long he's going to be out for, but Brian Hill, if you got him, you got to start him this week for sure if you went out and spent some money on him. So get him into your lineup. Should be a pretty good spot for him traveling to Carolina. So Brian Hill, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, Damon Williams, and Josh Jacobs. Get them in your lineups this week. They should be good to go. Next up, wide receivers. I got DJ Moore with the Falcons first on the list. Been solid in the past 2 weeks. He doesn't have any touchdowns, but he has over 220 receiving yards in the past 2 games, along with 16 catches. so he is rolling. Curtis Samuel's been stealing a touchdown here or there, but I think that he could find the end zone this week. Give me 6 to 7 catches and at least 75 receiving yards. I like him to find the end zone this week. Just been kind of quiet in the red zone the previous week, so I think he does find pay dirt this week. Next up, we got Mohamed Sanu traveling to the Eagles with the Patriots. Eagles are allowing the 6th most fantasy points to receivers so far this year. Sanu's coming off a great performance, 10 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Eagles are better just up against the run, so I like the upside for Endelman and Sanu in this matchup. Give me 70 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. I think you can easily hit those numbers this week. Overall, the Eagles' secondary has not been good. They're definitely a team that you want to continue to stream receivers against, quarterbacks against for sure. You're, of course, starting Tom Brady this week. I don't know what weeks you're not starting Tom Brady. Maybe he's playing Buffalo. I don't know. But yeah, Mohamed Sanu in line for some good work this week. Again, going to be more passing. If you need some sneaky starts, look for Rex Burkhead on your waiver wire. Any of those guys in that lineup, maybe like a tight end. I'm not even sure. Ben Watson, right? They're using Ben Watson. I think there's going to be a lot of short passing for Brady in this matchup. I like Endelman and Sanu the most to benefit from that, but there are some deeper options there. Philip Dorsett, Ben Watson, Rex Burkhead, some of these deeper guys that might get involved a little bit more this week in the passing game. So look out for that matchup. I think that Brady's going to have a pretty solid day, and I like Mohamed Sanu to be accompanied by that. So fire him up, no question this week. Juicy matchup with the Eagles. Next up, Deebo Samuel. 49ers, like I said, weapons are beat up, weapons are down. Kittle's likely out. Sanders is banged up, talking like he's going to play. I like Deebo Samuel the most here out of this lineup. Everyone, like I said, is banged up, but the Cardinals are allowing the 10th most fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Their defense has just been bad overall, allowing the most passing touchdowns, only 4 interceptions on the year, like I mentioned, with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I like him to get 5 or 6 catches this week. I'm really unsure on the yardage. I think he gets over 50, right? But because they use him in rushing plays, they use him on screens, they use him on deep balls, he has a lot of versatility. So I like him to get a lot of usage this week with all the weapons banged up. Not sure on the yardage, like I said, but I think he does land a touchdown this week with about 5 to 6 catches. Next up, we have Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley is playing the Dolphins. I put the team there. Buffalo traveling to the Dolphins. Dolphins are allowing the 13th most points to receivers in fantasy. Has at least 70 yards or a touchdown in his past 4 games, Cole Beasley. I'm expecting somewhere 5 to 6 catches, kind of similar to Deebo Samuel, and scores a touchdown. The last time they played each other, Beasley found the end zone. I like him to do the same this week. I think that they just spend a little bit more time trying to shadow John Brown. Opens up a little bit more availability for Cole Beasley, especially closer to the goal line and in the red zone, which has pretty much been his MO so far, in this season. Brown, when he gets covered heavy, opens up a little bit more opportunity. He doesn't bust off for big numbers, but he's finding the end zone and he's getting a fair amount of catches and yardage. So, like I said, at least 70 yards or a touchdown in his past 4 games. I like him to get like 5 to 7 catches, 5 to 6 catches, something like that this week, and find the end zone. So fire up Cole Beasley, no concern whatsoever. Should have a healthy role this week up against the Dolphins. Okay, next up, Calvin Ridley at Carolina. Hasn't had a big game in a while, but I do like him to find a touchdown this week. I like him to find pay dirt. Panthers are allowing steady work in the passing game, 9th most fantasy points allowed to receivers. Panthers secondary has not been great in recent weeks, so I like Ridley in this spot. Atlanta showed some flash last week, I understand, up against the Saints, so I think we're all a little bit more excited about these weapons going forward. Ridley, Julio Jones, I know Hooper is out, but I got Brian Hill on this list, so with Freeman out, Hooper out, Sanu gone, I think there's still plenty of upside for Ridley this week. I think the matchup is right, and I think he does find the end zone. I'm not really sure on the catches. He's only, I think, totaled over 5 catches just one time this season. So give me somewhere like 5 to 7 catches. I think he gets a little bit more work this week with some of these other weapons out and, it just being a really good spot up against Carolina. So fire up Calvin Ridley, no concern. So I got Calvin Ridley, Cole Beasley, Deebo Samuel, Mohamed Sanu, and DJ Moore. Fire those guys up this week, no concern. Okay, tight ends, and then we're wrapping it up here. First tight end up, I got Tyler Eifert at Oakland. Ended the touchdown drought last week. He found the end zone, has put a couple of good weeks together here, has over 70 yards receiving in the weeks before, last week, the week before, and the touchdown the week before that. So he's getting a fair amount of usage, and Oakland is allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the tight end position. They've allowed 4 passing touchdowns to tight ends in the past 3 games. Plenty of upside here for Tyler Eifert. I think that he can find the end zone this week. Maybe on limited snap work, but at the same time, I think that he's going to get steady usage here. The matchup is right, and they're using him in scoring positions, on scoring plays. When he's running routes, he's getting targeted. So fire him up this week. If you need a deeper tight end spot, I'm not telling you to fire up Tyler Eifert over, Zach Ertz still, or something like that. But fire up Tyler Eifert this week. I think he's a deeper must start for you. If you're hunting or hurting for a tight end this week. Next up, I have Noah Fant at Minnesota. Vikings, middle of the road against the tight ends. It's not like the most favorable matchup, at least like position-wise. But Noah Fant just has more upside this week. Deshaun Hamilton's gone down. He's out. Obviously, we saw Sanders leave. There's some banged-up pieces there for the Broncos in general. And with Brandon Allen at quarterback, new quarterback effect, Noah Fant's getting a little bit more action. He had over 100 yards and a touchdown last week and 5 catches the week before that. So, his opportunities are growing. I'd like him to get 5 or 6 catches this week and maybe even find the end zone. A lower, touchdown-dependent option, but I think that his role in this offense is expanding, and I think that we need to be starting him every week. This is still a guy that still went early on in the draft, in the NFL draft. So, he was a big target coming out of college, coming out of Iowa. Tight end city right now, the Iowa College. I like Noah Fant a lot this week. I think he's going to be fantasy relevant again. Fire him up, no concern. Brandon Allen and him seem to have a bit of a connection going, so I think we want to keep riding that out. Next up, I have Kyle Rudolph, hosting Denver, or with Denver, at Denver, with Denver. They're at home. Vikings are at home. Rudolph is rolling, with Thielen out of the lineup, and Thielen isn't looking great for this week. I'm not sure if he's going to be out or not yet, but he has 4 receiving touchdowns in the past 4 weeks. He doesn't have a ton of yardage, but he's getting looks in the red zone. He's getting targeted. Had a circus catch last week, which was pretty sweet. That was an awesome catch. But he had no yardage. He had like less than 30 total yards last week, I think. The Denver defense has been pretty solid, so I think that there's going to be some opportunities for Rudolph in the middle of the field, opening up. Olabisi Johnson, if he's the guy out there, if Thielen's out there, he's still coming back from injury. So I think that they could slow either of those guys down pretty easily. Same thing with Diggs. So I think there's a little bit more opportunity for Rudolph this week. I think he does find the end zone once more. And, after Thielen comes back, I think, those numbers for Rudolph will kind of, diminish a little bit, will fade. But right now, if Thielen's out of the lineup, I definitely want to keep Rudolph rolling and on my card every week. So keep him in the lineup this week. I think he does find the end zone, does find Pater. Next up, I got Jared Cook hosting Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to the tight end position. And Jared Cook has shown a pulse, at least a touchdown or 70 yards receiving in his last 3 appearances. He's gaining, some steam. Jared Cook has already scored a touchdown on them this season in his previous matchup, so I like him to find the end zone this week. 50 to 60 receiving yards and a touchdown for Jared Cook. Think he is fantasy relevant this week. Been pretty inconsistent, to be honest with you. Out of the lineup, didn't play a couple of weeks, was banged up, was hurt, but he's been, pretty steady, even with Breeze and Bridgewater. So I like him this week. 5 or 6 catches, 50 to 60 yards, and a touchdown. Lastly, I have Darren Waller. He's had some slower weeks in previous weeks, but I think this is a get-right game for him with the Bengals. I think that he's going to get 6 to 7 catches and a touchdown. The game flow just hasn't been great for him in past weeks. Neither defense is amazing in this matchup, so I think there's going to be there's going to be positive game flow. And Darren Waller, just simply comes back out of his shell. If you were concerned about starting him this week based off of previous performance, cut that shit out. Get him back into the lineup. He's going to be solid. Going to find the end zone this week. I'm very confident in that. So get Darren Waller back in your lineups. That's Darren Waller, Jared Cook, Kyle Rudolph, and Noah Fant with Tyler Eifert. Tight end position. Get all those guys in there. That's the must starts for the week. Hope you guys are good to go for tomorrow, for Sunday. We're moving right along here, coming down to the conclusion of this year. Been having a lot of fun with all this. We're going to keep things rolling here. I'll see you guys tomorrow, 11:30 Eastern. We are going live. This is Take It to the Hizzy Fantasy Football. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.